You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is
MikeS, everybody.
Hey Mike. Mike's all new to the podcast, everybody.
Yes.
We have a new contributor. And Mike, where do you hail from? So folks know about you.
Right now I'm in the greater Houston area of Texas.
Hiding out, running from the law?
Yeah, we're down and nestled in a quarter of the outskirts of Houston. Yeah, laying low.
Excellent. And Mike, you had emailed me, gosh, I want to say probably like 8 or 9 months ago, and we were supposed to do this back in June, and I got COVID the week we were supposed to do it. And then life happened, and now we're on the other side of the holidays. As everybody who listens to the podcast knows, like October through December is just a gauntlet. So we're on the other side, and we're finally engaging in. And you brought this movie to me like 9 months ago, so I'm very happy to get to it. Can you tell folks what we're talking about today?
Oh yeah, today we're talking about one of my all-time personal favorite action films, The Raid, or I guess the U.S. release is called The Raid Redemption, which came out I think somewhere 2011, 2012.
And what really hit you about this? Why did you want to do this one so badly? So badly that you reached out from furthest greater Houston area.
Right. Well, to me, like this movie was one of my good friends from Austin, Kevin, brought to me. He's kind of like my one friend that will show up, or used to back when I was in my 30s. Would show up in town every once in a while and go, oh, hey, look, I brought you this movie. Let's check it out, because there's something special or, different about it. It was under the radar, but, definitely high quality. He's the one that brought me like, oh, hey, let's watch The Room. I was like, what's that? That kind of thing. So this one, it kind of like hit me right in my sweet spot for what I'd like to get out of an action film, which is some sense of a little bit of, I know every action film is kind of a little bit hyper real, but the ones that feel a little more grounded, a little more believable in terms of your characters, how they feel. Then it's not just like, oh, I'm an action guy, I'm going to do an action thing and then it's done. It's having a real sense of palpable danger. And that, to get to that level, you have to have a director that really kind of has a vision and the technical skills to do it. And I think Gareth Evans, the director of this one, kind of had that. He's not like a household name or anything, but you could definitely tell he was a fan of the craft, and kind of knew what he wanted to do with the film, and had a definite idea for how he wanted to kind of punctuate the film with a lot of big moments that kind of make it a real crowd pleaser. I can kind of go on to this in a little bit, but it became one of the films that the place where I work, I ended up just randomly, after I had seen it with my friend, I was like, oh wow, this thing is awesome, and took it back to my coworker friends, go, hey, I just saw this movie and it is wild, like it's one of the best action films I've seen in decades, and said, why don't we watch it at work? So we kind of got like 6-7 people together and kind of watched it, and they all just had a blast. It's one of those movies that's a really great crowd film, a party crowd, especially for people you haven't seen it with. It can be new to you because you're seeing it through their eyes for the first time. You're like, every time they see one of those big moments, you go, oh, okay, look, everyone kind of reacts, kind of the way you did the first time. And so I got a lot of enjoyment out of that. It's actually become a recurring thing. I've actually shown that movie and its sequel at work to like an expanding number of people. Started like 6 or 7. I kind of started doing company-wide emails. We get like 25, 30 people who just come into a room and just all get together and watch movies. filmed both the Raid movies, and then we've kind of expanded on. That's a whole separate thing. But I've got this whole company movie night thing that I'm becoming mildly famous for at work. Oh, let's go watch Anchorman. Oh, let's go watch Evil Dead 2. That kind of thing. So
Well, that's awesome. I
yeah,
love that. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, we do these kind of like Friday night watch parties that are just like my wife's brother and his wife and some other friends and whatnot. But I know very much of what you speak. It's super fun to kind of bring a movie and kind of program it and enjoy watching it with folks. But to be able to do that with your coworkers that's an excellent working space.
Yeah, they're really my management, everybody else is they're it's a pretty um, open kind of a work environment, I guess. So like when I first brought the idea up, they're like, oh yeah, like, we got this meeting room, you can use that, and like we'll cater in, get some stuff going. So it's become like a thing,
Okay.
and I've tried to use whatever writing skills I have to sort of punch out the movies before. Kind of now at the head of time. Hey, everybody, we're gonna do this movie in about a month. Let me know what days you can make it, and then just kind of give the background on it as best I can, as far as like hype people up for the movies that they're coming out. I'm gonna try to do. I think coming up here in April, we're gonna do Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping, and then
Nice.
I wanted to roll out later on this year. I'm going to do Alien and Aliens because I think that's just like as far as 80s action goes, that kind of hits the same notes that I feel with the Raid, of just as far as like tension and drama and a little bit of realistic behaviors from the characters, in terms of the dangers they're facing. So
I am
looking
going to
forward to
put
that.
a big old red circle around that idea because I was going to talk about aliens in comparison to this movie
Oh
at
yeah,
one
great.
point during this convo. Yeah. I think that's really cool, and I'm glad to hear you brought them the raid. I agree that like I remember when it came out and there being this kind of like little ripple through social media of the raid, the raid, the raid, and then it kind of faded out. And that used to kind of happen. It's one of the last Asian imports I remember. I guess it's more like Pacific Islander. I don't know exactly Indonesia's Pacific
Oh, you
Islander.
made both.
Yeah. And it's one of the last movies I really kind of remember getting that kind of traction from that wasn't like English, I guess. And but I mean, in the 90s, that was a pretty regular thing of like you'd hear. I mean, that was kind of the era of Jet Li and Jackie Chan and our beloved figure Michelle Yeoh.
Mhm.
And then I heard it's like, well, it's an Indonesian martial art film. And I was like, oh, that's going to be crazy because I've never seen Indonesian martial arts.
Right.
And then I didn't hear much about it. Simon brought it to me at one point, and I was telling Mike before we started recording. I wasn't sure if we'd podcast it or not because I just forget at this point. So I was very glad we hadn't. So we got a chance to do it here. But yeah, it's a absolutely mind blowing movie if you've not seen it, and if you have, please weigh in the comments on Facebook, on Twitter, on wherever. Certainly on the SoundCloud, we'd appreciate it. We'd love to hear about the first time y'all saw it. So you saw it when your friend brought it to you,
Mhm.
and now you've shown it to folks. So have you? What you said you'd done some digging on the film. What all did you find out about Gareth Evans? Because frankly, I don't know a whole lot about the guy.
Yeah, it's really interesting, kind of just how it all came together. Gareth Evans is a Welsh director who, when I was reading articles, said that he grew up basically. He kind of had the classic build for someone who would turn into like a director. He grew up above a video store in England, just got really big into Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and John Woo and all that stuff. And I think he said he actually did also see 80s Indonesian films, but the martial arts films of Indonesia in the 80s were more kind of like mystical. It's like they had the pencak silat martial arts that they're known for, but it also have people like turning into tigers and stuff like that and flying through trees and whatnot. So it's, a little bit more fantastical than I guess what kind of Gareth sort of blended, that style with, a more grounded, Western approach to films, but, came out on the better side of some other, to me, a lot of bigger American directors sort of miss the mark when they try to when they come up with their idea of what action is. To me, Gareth is still kind of hitting the pinnacle as far as I've seen so far on getting all the elements right. So the story of how the raid came together was that he was actually in Indonesia filming a documentary about the martial art, and I believe he was connected to Indonesia by way of a girlfriend that he has or had at the time, and that's where he was scouting the various martial arts gyms in the area and was just taking footage, kind of just getting some recordings of practices and whatnot. And that's where he met the principal actor Iko Uwais. I'm probably going to mangle the names, but it's the best I can go. Uh, and he kind of saw right away that this guy had a little extra something. There was kind of a charisma, a real sort of like, and I think that's part of what makes his character Rama in the story, very likable, and you kind of want to get behind him, and you really kind of feel for his, what he's going through, right? Because he's obviously got the technical skills, the martial arts, and the prowess to, be lethal. But I think something in his face and his demeanor, he's not the biggest guy, but and his face is very almost kind of, it's got a kindness to it, but he has a pretty good range of emotion. I think he shows through the film, that just immediately drew Gareth to him, and so they started working together. They had a first outing was a movie called Merantau, which was 2009. That was kind of more of a story of local villager goes to the city, finds trouble, and rescues some people, kind of thing, which was very good. But you can see it sort of had the beginnings of what they would eventually mold into the Raid and the Raid 2 in terms of the art style and the choreography of the action and everything else. But it was definitely more of a less of an action film than the Raid and the Raid 2. When they went to make the Raid, at first they wanted to do the actual story that became the Raid 2, but they didn't have enough funding for it because it hadn't been proven yet. So they ended up getting $1 million, and that was the funding they had for the Raid, which I think, in terms of the quality of the film, and it's not going to look like your blockbusters, the mega Michael Bay level stuff, but they did do everything they could with that budget. I think it came through. They used it in the right places, and that once the relative success of the Raid, proved itself, then they got additional funding to kind of go bigger and broader with the Raid 2, which I think you said you haven't seen that yet, but if you get to it, I think you'll see that they were able to up the quality in a lot of different ways, and or just more money equals better cameras, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Other than that, oh, sorry.
I was just say, yeah. I mean, $1 million. I mean, one of the things that's crazy about this film is I didn't do that much prep, partially because I knew Mike had done a whole lot of homework, but I also just ran out of time. I was reading that they used like airsoft guns and stuff, and not like real weapons, and no practical squibs or anything like that for the most part. Which, when you think about spending $1 million down in 2011, like, it's one thing to think about that in 2020 or so, or 2023 certainly, but in 2011 someone knew what they were doing, because it is seamless through that movie. All the muzzle flashes, the action on the guns, and the blood spray. And I've seen other movies, lots of other movies now, where they're doing the digital blood spray, and this one, absolutely, to me, watching it, I feel like it's really seamless. I can't believe what they were able to get as far as staffing, sets, lighting, and I mean, I thought, well, maybe they recycled a whole bunch of actors, and then on the credits, because I mean, people are running by, and it's like, put a different wig on him, put a mustache on him. Like, I don't know how the thing's made. Nope, everybody's a different person.
Yeah.
So they're cutting checks to all of those people as well. They were very smart about however they made this movie. I believe your wife is a project manager, and I believe she would really appreciate seeing how they pulled that off.
Oh yeah, I haven't convinced her yet to watch this movie, but yeah, maybe one day that's the angle I'll go with. Like, look how here's what they had to work with, and they got out of it. That's a new angle I'll try one day. I think a lot of that, what you'd said, kind of comes down to what Gareth said about the production, is that he basically shoots the film going into and out of an edit. Like, he knows where this shot's going to end and where the next one's going to begin, and he's got it all mapped out, very well, to where he's not wasting a whole lot of time or film or time in edit bay, cobbling it together. I think that shows as well. There's the strength of, like, okay, I know that doing this action move, and then the camera's going to change here. We're going to, move and go into this motion or in this next fight, area, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
Um, yeah.
See, that's the
Uh,
kind of stuff that like when the Marvel movies now are really breaking the movies down to like we're going to bring in this indie prestige director who's going to do like everything but the action. And when we have the action, we're going to bring in basically action choreographers and people who know how to do all of that. That skill to be able to walk into that. It's different. Like Hitchcock would basically fall asleep in the chair while they were filming because he'd already storyboarded and written everything and he knew exactly what people were going to do. And by take number 5, he was over it, right?
yeah.
So but to know going in on an action movie like this one where everything feels improvised clearly wasn't, I guess.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really crazy.
Yeah, no, it definitely, yeah, it definitely shows up on the screen. I'm glad that this. I think the right number of people have noticed. He's like I said, he's still not being pulled to helm the next Marvel movie or whatever, but he's gone on to, like he said, he filmed The Raid 2. There was another movie, a movie he filmed called Apostle. I think that's more of like a gothic colonial horror. I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list, my long list of movie backlog. Um, and also he was involved or is involved in a show on Sky Network in England called Gangs of London.
Okay.
That kind of follows like kind of a modern day, gang warfare kind of thing in mob stuff in London. And that also he kind of brought the things you see in The Raid, that kind of like visceral realism of the extra feeling of lethality. He brings that to a lot of the action pieces in that one. Like one of a friend of mine, he thought, and there's like one episode is some special forces team taking out some guys who are hiding out in a house in the English countryside. And like, sometimes movies, I don't know how he does it, but like some movies, like, people have like AKs or ARs, whatever, and they kind of don't seem that intimidating. And some people can film those guns to where they feel like, hand cannons. It's crazy. Just the way he kind of shot it, you get that extra feeling like, oof, these things are dangerous. I definitely feel uneasy about what's going on for the people that are on the screen right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because he got that vibe even with those airsoft guns and
Mm-hmm.
and virtual effects in the raid. Where I said wanted to talk a little bit about aliens in comparison to this. So we have a tendency to not actually talk about what the movie is about. So now we do the South Coast Media story synopsis. We're sponsored by South Coast Media for all your film and commercial video needs if you're in the greater Houston area or beyond. So this movie is essentially it's going to be easy to do this one. Essentially, you see a young, good-looking dude wake up with his wife, and he's going off and he's partaking in a raid, and it seems even as they're parking to go to the raid, like something's up. There's not enough people. Like there's 18 people, but you're like, maybe more. Especially once they're in the door, because they're coming into a block that is been a 15, 16 story apartment block that has been taken over by a criminal overlord, and he's given some free rent to like crazy people and stuff, to whatever criminals basically are also giving him money to be able to stay there, and he's running a New Jack City style drug den out of there. So they go in to go do the raid, and things go sideways, and it's almost in real time. I would say it's probably like half of real time in the like 110 minutes or whatever.
That's it. Yeah, it's a pretty tight film, for sure. Yeah, they definitely, there's no. That's kind of one of the things I liked about it too, is that the economy of the story. Like you can have movies that are fair on details, and that's because of a lack of attention or effort. They're just like, whatever. But in this one, I think one of the strengths is that they communicate all the necessary elements without feeling like they're cheating you of some kind of necessary detail. Like the opening scene with Rama when he's kind of starting his day. Like I think within like the first 5 minutes, they kind of just give you an idea of what's going on. Like the first shot is of like a 9 millimeter sitting on the desk by a tactical watch is ticking. He's doing his morning calisthenics, sit ups, and he's working the martial arts, or whatever that thing that Jackie Chan beats up on all the time with all the wooden pole with all the legs and arms on it, or the heavy bag, and then doing some prayers and then going to talk, just kind of a quick little word with his pregnant wife that kind of sets the stakes really immediately, and then from there it's a quick word to his dad that has no context. He just says, "I'll bring him back." And you're like, okay, I don't know what that means at all right now. And then it just boom, cut to the Raid Redemption opening title screen, and then I think from there you're inside the SWAT van if they head en route to the apartment complex.
Yeah, and it when I said I wanted to compare it to Aliens, I think there's a few things. I mean, one, it's kind of like the drop ship from Aliens. It's a bunch of people who don't know exactly what they're about to get into. There's kind of the same vibe of, these heavily armed but kind of nervous people. And they do feel like things are under control because they work within a certain system. And of course, once they go inside, it is not under control. And you do have the kind of like initial wave of half the team gets wiped out. And it's like you were saying, it's really grounded how they handle all of this. I would compare this to something like John Wick, where has more of a video game style, right? Where
yeah
John's just like, I'm moving, fluidly through hallways, just, shooting people. Nothing's happening to me really. And always know he's going to be fine, and everyone will make bad decisions about how to kill John Wick. And it doesn't
building up his combo. Combo streak.
So when you do have Rama kind of pop out as the like guy who's going to take you through the course of the story, he's gathering baggage the whole time, kind of like the characters in Aliens. As those, by the time you get down to just Hudson and Ripley together, Hicks and Ripley together, it's there's not a whole lot left, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of trauma that has been incurred. And you also have like a very, this complex building where you don't know where, in this case, it's going to be the various criminals and whatnot popping out at them. And so there is a little bit of a video game feel, same as like with Aliens, the aliens dropping out of the ceilings and whatnot. But
right.
This feels possible in a way that I think those other like Aliens certainly doesn't. Certainly like John Wick, it like we've never podcasted John Wick because I know people love it, but I just don't really care for it because it doesn't to me feel in any way grounded. I feel like I am watching someone play a video game whenever I watch a John Wick movie. So this to me has much more of a visceral vibe, and even though I kind of essentially know one way or another Rama's going to walk back out of the building probably by himself, everything in it, like the way they accomplish solving all the challenges, like, fire axe through the floor.
Yeah.
Like super freaking creative, right? I mean, it's just like really smart stuff. And that whole sequence of chopping through the floor and like they're still coming from the floor below. So what do? You blow up a refrigerator with a propane tank in it, like just freaking creative ideas.
Yeah.
So.
On the point about why, like, for instance, John Wick doesn't grab you, like, and that's exactly why why this film appeals so strongly to me. Is like there's a lot of good action films out there, a lot of good directors, but oftentimes there's certain ones like I think it's essentially what you're saying. If you don't feel the sense of danger, then are you really engaged at all with the film? The whole film's action means action, risk, danger. Mm-hmm. And if what you're seeing on screen just doesn't add up to your brain, then you're just watching like, oh, okay, whatever. I know they're going to be fine, but here they actually sell more of a that kind of uncertainty, I guess. Like I think a good example for me was a recent memory was I think we were watching the most recent Kingsman movie, The Kingsman or whatever. And there's a scene where I think the one of the characters is like running through a World War I no man's land, carrying somebody, and both sides are like shooting. There's bombs going off, everything's exploding, and I just couldn't be more, disengaged. I'm just like, this. There's no reason that he should be alive at all. This isn't his cunning or skill or whatever he's employing to get through this. He's just running, and because he's got plot armor, he's gonna be fine. And I don't really care. It's
I think plot armor is. I mean, I've heard that phrase, and I've never deployed it here, but I think it's a great way to describe that. Yeah. Um, and I mean, maybe there's a bit of that for Rama, but it's not like he doesn't get the living hell beat out of him.
true.
So,
But they do. I think the film does. That's part of what it does. It's constantly setting the tone. Like when they first get out of the van, and Jaka, who's like the sergeant, I guess he's really kind of in charge. There's an older white-haired guy who's, Wagyu, I think is his character's name. So they're kind of talking about what, how they're going to go in and first infiltrate into the building. And there's key scene where Jaka, like, they're like kind of hiding behind a wall. He looks around the corner up at the apartment block, and they do a nice shot where it's sort of like, it's kind of like looking from the down up, and like the apartment block kind of seems to grow, and just sort of, it gives you the sense like, oh, this is imposing. This looks like a lot of ground for not enough guys to cover. And you can go, that registers like, oh yeah, this Jaka, now the sergeant, he's like going, oh man, this is going to be rough. And you're just kind of doing that when they go to the ground floor to break in, pick the lock and get into the door. Like everyone's breathing heavy. Everyone's kind of they're selling every actor, not just the lead guys. Everyone's kind of going, really doing a good job of for people who I'm sure aren't really big name trained actors. They're doing a good job of, man, I'm nervous. This is crazy. I'm a little, I'm scared here, but we're still gonna get the job done. They just kind of, that the film builds on that moment by moment. We'll talk about someone later, I think. But that's what kind of got my attention really quick when I was watching it for the first time.
it does. And it does something really interesting in that as the action actually grows, part of what it does narratively, and I think in a really smart way, is it brings the audience into, you have that little nugget at the beginning of I'll bring him back, but they're telling you who the people are through action, which is hard to do. But like you have Andy, who is there's two right-hand men. There's a right-hand man and a left-hand man for the main bad guy, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's Mad Dog, who we need to talk about for sure. And then there's Andy, who's kind of like, Mad Dog's like the super martial artist, and Andy's like the brains kind of guy. And figuring out what's going on with him. And it's all done through like glances and just kind of how he's looking at screens, and then the action he takes in an elevator when he's going down, and suddenly he just kills the two guys who are going with him, and what the hell is going on? But it's really good stuff, and Rama's kind of got his own unspoken thing of, you don't know who he's looking for. Whatever you do, figure out pretty quickly it's got to be Andy. But then by the end, they're not shooting guns anymore. Like there's not gunplay going on anymore. The most of the people in the building are not there. If they're armed, it's with a knife or something. So it feels like the action should be receding, but instead it goes from kind of the simplicity of, I have an AR-15, I am shooting, to now it's this hand-to-hand, like I'm going to have to fight with my knuckles from here to there. And it amazing fight choreography in scene after scene.
It's Mad Dog who is the principal choreographer of the film, so which is unsurprising. Which people who watch this film will have seen him, and also, well, people who've seen the Raid 2 will see the main bad guy of that one, or main tough. Both those guys were in John Wick 3, so I know you might not have seen John Wick 3, but
I did actually. I didn't see John Wick 2. I saw John Wick 1 and 3. So
yeah. Well, that's another. I'm glad to see those guys got some Hollywood nods a little bit there. But yeah, they definitely, like, you get the impression quick that Mad Dog's, they set him up as like, okay, yeah, we're this guy, got to watch out for him. That's even Jaka, the sergeant in the truck. He's delivering this rapid fire exposition. That's the only time you really get exposition. Like, hey, this is a really tough place. Here's the guys that you need to look out for, and so on. Um, but speaking of the bad guys, like I want to talk a minute about the head guy, which was named Tama. The
Yeah.
guy's the guy. I think he's the character actor from Indonesia, but he's the main leader, bad guy, kind of in charge. And they introduced him also in I think a very effective way. Jaka has just gotten done with his scene in the van talking about how bad these guys are, and then they cut to the scene with Mad Dog with Andy, with with Tama in there, and the first shot you see is just him sitting or standing at his desk, and he's just calmly eating a bowl of noodles, like casually, he's in just a sleeveless t-shirt, very very casual style, very easy. And then it just switches. He puts the noodles down and then picks up a gun and then walks forward. And you see he's got like five guys on their knees, bound, over some, sitting on some tarp, and then like he just proceeds to start, executing each one of them. And I think that was a very, you know, say a lot by showing, just enough, which is basically like this guy is completely at ease with, he can eat a meal and go straight into like, dispatching some, rival gang members or whatever. With the addition of the nice little, twist at the end where the last guy he runs out of bullets, has to go back to the desk for extra ammunition, and changes his mind when he finds something else in that desk drawer.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I this is when you said he knew what was going to happen at every cut. That was literally the cut I thought of immediately, because it's so well done of how he executes that last guy. Of like, I was like, I couldn't remember if they showed it or not, and Jamie watched it.
It's kind of like a whip cut, like the camera like moves with the swing.
Yeah, and then it cuts to the next scene before you see any contact, and it's so well done.
That is like a point that Gareth mentioned in an article that I read that said that he acknowledges that films like that he does like that, like The Raid, are violent films, but he feels it's most effective when you kind of like hit with intensity, but then you move on, you don't linger on it. You just kind of like it's like what he called like punchlines. That's like some of the bigger moments of the films are what he called the punchlines. Like we have good action all the way throughout, but then there's like a few ones that get the reaction from the crowd. Kind of like the people are just sort of viscerally responding to. But they just kind of like you hit that, and then the edit goes straight into the next thing, and your mind's still kind of reeling from what you just saw as the next action's unfolding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that would have been. You don't get anything more out of the character if they were to stay on it and you were to watch him actually perform the action and then stand, which, normally you'd get the overhead shot of the guy laying in front of him with the blood pooling out, and you'd be like, oh, right. He's such a badass. But that it's not as effective as people think it is when they shoot those scenes. I think Gareth is absolutely right. The scene that you have kind of the scene where they lose all the guys, where they realize they're trapped in the cameras are everywhere, and they all basically are pinned down a couple flights below. They can't shoot back up to get the guys. After that, the guys get split up, and that to me is when the movie really, really takes off.
Yes.
You kind of have both fronts of what's going on there, but it's that's when you start getting into kind of more of the character stuff and the martial arts. I enjoy every minute of this film, but I do feel like that's where it goes from kind of like pushing the red zone to the needles fully in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
Than for the rest of the film, especially when Rama has to carry the wounded guy down the hallway while also fighting the other guys. And I'll admit, I turned to Jamie in the middle of that and said, yeah, Marvel's been ripping this off now for, the past 12 years. And they have. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you watched the Daredevil TV show.
At least the first season, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I love
the hallway scene that was pretty, maybe in the second season got some positive credit or press, I think. I've missed that one, but yeah, I heard about there's a one cut kind of Daredevil thing.
Yeah, and I'd seen Daredevil before I saw this movie, but even when I was watching the movie the first time, I was like, oh, like we have borrowed heavily from the Raid in order to
Yeah.
do some of this stuff in Daredevil, and even like the last James Bond movie, as he's like running around the villain's base at the end. You know, there you can say, oh, there's some Bourne here, whatever. I'm like, there's also some Raid in there. The DNA of this movie has really spiraled out in a way that I'm not sure has been really acknowledged. I think like when Jackie Chan was doing his stuff and people kind of started trying to imitate it and then hire him
Mhm.
and bring him over here, and we didn't know what to do with Jackie Chan.
Oh,
Like,
no. Yeah. They don't know what to do with Iko Uwais either. And some of the movies he's been in, like,
what has he been in here?
he was, what did he go on to do? Um, he was, well, him and the couple of, Mad Dog and them, they were like in a blink and you'll miss it scene of Star Wars Episode 7. Like they were like some Raider gang group or something. Like they're
They
basically
were
like,
the pirate guys. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And like they just had no lines. Like, I don't know why they're in there, to be honest with you. I already mentioned the two guys were in John Wick. Iko Uwais most recently, like um, he was in Snake Eyes, uh,
Okay.
which I didn't see. I just kind of flipped through. He was like one of the guys that sort of taught, kind of like was fighting Snake Eyes in the dojo or whatever in training session. Some Stuber, I never seen that either. I think that's
Yeah, that was a Dave Bautista movie, I think.
okay. And the the one that my friends, my Austin friends and I went up to Austin to go see this with them was Mile 22 with Marky Mark. And
Oh yeah, I don't even remember that one.
that you saw it though?
No, no, no. I don't
Um,
remember it existing. To me, this is my acknowledgement that there's something called Mile 22 right now.
there's Mile 22. It's a famous director. I want to say it. Who was the guy? How did he do like a submarine movie? Peter
Oh,
Berg.
Peter Berg. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just goes to like Peter Berg. I don't know all of his filmography, but I know he's an accomplished director. But Eco's talents were totally wasted in this film. Like the guy doesn't know how to shoot an action scene at all. It's
Yeah.
like completely choppy. Just like I think there was one where it was like 22 cuts in 16 seconds of him fighting something. It was just kind of like constantly flip, 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 flip. You couldn't tell what direction the action was coming from. He just made a really good martial artist look very stilted in this kind of like, oh, this is plus this is just an overall bad film. This is not great, but I mean that's a whole separate topic. But yeah,
Yeah, I feel like American film, action film. I mean, I'll give John Wick credit where it's due. You can see everything happening, right?
yeah,
And
they
I
gave him a
think
shot.
yeah, and and I think the one I did like from those guys was Nobody, which was Bob Odenkirk was the star. It's basically
Oh
John
yeah,
Wick, except you actually give a shit about the main character. Um, but there was a lot of this stuff, and the first time I remember really noticing it was when I saw Batman Begins. Like they did not seem to know how to shoot Christian Bale like punching people as Batman. And so they did a lot of like, and I'm like, well, he's wearing all black. So if you keep cutting these various angles, all I'm seeing are like kind of like black fabric moving around. Like I can't really see what's happening. So I'm kind of still waiting for the closest, unfortunately, I have to say, because I'm not a fan of the Zack Snyder movies, but you could at least
mm-hmm.
see what Batman was doing in Batman versus Superman. Like if I'm going to give that a positive note.
Yeah,
But that's one of the beautiful things about this film is like, there's no doubt that these guys, and they're really, I mean, they're not always really making contact, I'm sure, or it's much softer than it appears,
mm-hmm.
once you add the Foley sound effects. But um, it you can't fake a human doing a lot of what they're doing in this movie, especially on $1 million.
Yeah.
And so you really are dependent on how cool can these guys choreograph a fight scene, and
Right.
do they know how to shoot it?
They had it was article I read said that there was no head contact when they did the fights, but they did do they had like a lot of light padding. Like there was a lot of actual body shot contact in it. So I'm sure they got, put through the ringer as far as, multiple takes or when they were putting it all together. One of the things I do wish that Hollywood would take more cribbing from of Gareth Evans is, part of what makes the fights cool is the camera rigs that he put together. I don't know the technical which cameras they had, but they attached like a steering wheel rig to the cameras, and then I guess the body harnesses and whatnot. So like if you some of the fight scenes you'll see like the guys like punching and or like slamming a guy's head on the desk or table or something like that, and they actually could like turn the camera and like rotate it to kind of like just help you sort of like the camera would sort of feel the swing moving through. It would sort of like translate more of that motion into your brain when you're watching it. You can kind of feel the impact more, feel the swing. Or like when like you were mentioning earlier when they have to go down from one of the floors and they chop up the floor with the axe and they drop down through. There's a scene where Jocko, the sergeant, drops through and gets tackled by some guys, and then like the camera guy just kind of just jumps straight down. Actually, I don't think he doesn't jump down. They basically hand the camera down to someone who is below, and he grabs it, and they can kind of continue the action in one single shot. So it was kind of they were able to innovate in that way and sort of really make the camera more active, and they could kind of follow it and just sort of keep in the action a lot better and follow it better.
Yeah, I mean, we don't end up talking about budgets on these a ton when we're on the podcast, but I always want to talk about it especially when it's like, look, if you don't have a lot of money, you start getting creative. And when you describe something like that, I mean, and that was always the thing with Rodriguez, right? How did he do mariachi on, $7,000 and conning his mom into catering the thing? I mean, the innovative stuff that they must have been doing. I don't know. I'm assuming it was all shot on sound stages aside from the exteriors. Because they do a lot of like closing of doors. And if you really start looking at the walls of the apartments, you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
No one would patch a wall that way,
Right.
sort of thing. Like, why is it just stained the way it's stained? But
Very, very reasonable rent.
yeah. But it man, the creativity that Gareth and company here had and I mean, if it is true that I guess you said Mad Dog did all of the choreography,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a freaking find. I don't know if that guy's gone on to do, I mean, I know he was in John Wick and I know he was in Star Wars, but I don't know
I haven't
if
seen him
choreographing
yet,
anything else or
I hope so.
yeah. But yeah, it's a hell of a movie. I in addition to like Daredevil, another Marvel stuff, like I would definitely say, I think it was Winter Soldier has the scene where the soldiers bust in on Bucky in his apartment, and like that whole sequence. I think you can definitely see some vibes from that. I think other scenes less so, like when they're fighting like off the bridge and all that. And then I'm like, well. That does feel like 70s spy thriller stuff to me, but there's it'll be interesting to see down the years if people like do start actually recognizing Raid as that. And I don't really know. Do you know what the box office was finally on this thing? I mean, is it
Not that I have notes in front of me. It was like it made its money back for sure. But yeah, I didn't jot that down. It was, like I said, it wasn't a mega blockbuster. I don't know that the first one ever made into theaters. Not that I knew of. I don't remember any commercials or marketing for it. The sequel did come out in the theaters, but again, it wasn't like something you weren't seeing wall to wall ads on it. I mean, I made a special trip to Austin to see my friends just for that movie. I'm like, okay, this is coming out. We're seeing it, on the big screen, and well rewarded for it. But even then, I don't think the Raid 2 like mopped up at the box office, but still was overall successful.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, like, I know lots of people who have seen the first one. It made 9 million, but that's all probably theatrical. Mm-hmm. The Raid 2 made like 6.5 million theatrical. It says domestic 40%, but I don't know if that means here or in Indonesia. I have no idea. But I'm going to figure this out. No, I can't figure it out. But yeah, it's weird because it does feel like, I'll hear about mile 22 or whatever, and you go and look and you're like, that thing made $65 million or, whatever. And you're like, no, I've never met anyone who's seen mile 22.
Yeah.
And I feel
Like,
like
I don't want to.
lots of people have seen the raid at this point.
Yeah, and I try not to be like the guys like, oh, I know all the cool stuff that's not mainstream or whatever. But I mean, it's one of those things like that's kind of when I talked about the movie nights that I do. That was kind of my main mission when why the raid perfectly fit into what I wanted to do, which was to bring underseen, quality items that didn't get the recognition that I think they deserve. Kind of because I would ask anybody like, well, I'm going to show this movie called The Raid. They're like, what? Like no one had ever heard of it. It was just like not something, not even like, oh, I heard of it, but I never went and saw it. Like, what is that film? You're like, okay, well. Here, this is doing a lot of stuff that I think people should see and appreciate, but it's just the marketing arm just wasn't there for it for whatever reason.
No, gosh, yeah, and I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of 2011. I guess like HBO and all that were still like the going concerns at that point. It was before like the streaming stuff had really fired off, which may have given it a little bit more legs here. But. It is really, if you're just listening to this and you've never seen it, I think it was like $3 on Amazon Prime. So it was easy.
I think I have a minor bone pick with HBO Max. I think like around the time that I was putting one of the movie nights together and I was doing the raid, people were saying, oh, I can't make the movie night. But I was like, okay, well, it's on HBO Max right now if you want to go check it out. But sadly, at least after I'd made recommendations already, I regretfully went and looked at it on HBO Max, and I think the version they had was the English dub, which is just one of the worst. I mean, some dubs can be entertaining in their own right, but this was like we hired a bunch of frat guys at the local college, and it just whatever kind of drama and tension, all the stuff that makes the raid compelling, it just sucks it right all the air right out of it because the voices are just so ridiculous and bad. Like that one machete guy when he's menacing the couple who were hiding, Rama and his buddy. Normally that guy's all big crazy eyes, and he's got a real, the Indonesian language is so rapid fire and just kind of it's so interesting to listen to. And there's something when you get away from that from the actor's natural language, it just especially when in a movie that's trying to be serious, like it doesn't work at all. And I was like. So I was not happy with HBO with throwing out that version, and that I had recommended it as well because I was telling everybody like, oh, this is a really action-packed, tense movie, and I can think of no easier way to sort of like deflate any of that.
Yeah, and if you're going to watch a movie with subtitles, I mean, this is kind of the one to do it with because there's dialogue and it's important, but it's like you go 5 minutes with nobody talking, so
right.
Every line counts. So I can only imagine what that had to have been like when people then did open their mouth. And yeah. I don't think I've watched a dubbed over movie. Well, my rule is the only ones I try to insist on watching dubbed over are Godzilla movies, because I believe that is how God intended for me to watch all Godzilla movies. Because that's how I watched them on Jeff when I was 8 years old. So
big giant rubber, monsters. Like there's a slight bit of comedy to it. That's kind of why I think, back in the '90s, when my friends and I were watching Jackie Chan films, we most acts we had to that I think was dubbed. Maybe even in theater they might have been dubbed.
Yeah,
and,
they were.
Jackie, and part of that was because Jackie could, at least at some point in his film career, could do his own English. But but his kind of acrobatic, his whole background, his films are action packed, but they're also like, there's some lightheartedness, there's some, playfulness to it, right? And I think that English dub sort of kind of enhances that a little bit, where it sort of just plays the comedy side of his physicality a little bit more. So that, to me, I give him a pass for that. Same reason you with you and Godzilla. But if you're trying to, it has no application to like what is trying to take itself as a serious film. There's not really humor in the raid, but not joyless, but it's definitely like there's no haha moments in it.
No, it's not a zany movie
by any stretch. No.
The tough thing about talking about movies like this is there are arcs for almost every character, but they're pretty limited because it's really there to it's a showcase for Gareth Evans, right? He's showing that he knows how to do narrative economy. He knows how to use a budget. He knows how to direct actors, and certainly show that he knows how to whip ass on film. But you like the story arcs of Andy and Rama kind of like running into each other. So, look, spoilers. Hopefully you've already paused the movie, but they're brothers, and this is how they find each other after 6 years is during this raid. So that's a good story arc, but there's not a ton to say about it. They don't sit around and talk about their feelings. This movie does not have time for that. The corruption within the police department that kind of led to the raid kind of slowly unspools into the Lugo fella, having the ending that he probably deserved. You just freaking hate the guy by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the bad guy, the main bad guy, I mean, dude, he must not be able to speak a word of English, because otherwise they should have brought that guy over. He's very so expressive. Good. Yeah, charismatic. He's the kind of bad guy you love to watch just being a bad dude. He's just so good. And he's by far the least physical of anybody in the movie. If he doesn't have that giant 45 in his hand.
He's not ruling by physical intimidation. He just kind of just has that vibe, that aura of I'm the bad guy, I'm in charge. Don't, I'm slightly bit crazy if you push me, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Part of the reason why he was in control is because he has these magic monitors, cameras, which I know some of the movie magic. One of the things when they had the SWAT cops trapped in the kind of square hallway, and they were looking at the fight. It's one of those things where they have a shot that shows some of the SWAT team soldiers trapped, and then all of a sudden they cut back to Andy looking, and then they cut back, and all of a sudden now to zoom in on Rama. They're magical. Why is this camera going from this static security camera going from a wide medium shot to a tight close in? But I understand that's for movie magic, but
yeah. The one, if I had one thing about the movie that I wish they'd spent more time on, I did not understand why the one couple was living in the building.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I wish they'd been well, we get free rent here because he fixes the wiring or something, anything to explain why on earth you would live in that building.
Yes, yeah, not the best neighbors.
Yeah.
For them. But yeah, it was more. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There must have been some reason why they didn't get completely messed with every single day by all the rest of the tenants. But maybe he had to go there because his wife was sick and needed medication, or that's definitely. Yeah. What if they had anything for it, they left it on the writing room floor.
Yeah. But that is it's a tight movie, and it's really hard to poke holes in it because of what it is and how it's structured. When they get to the final physical fight, with Andy and Rama kind of teaming up on Mad Dog, just sit back with your popcorn. Because, man, there's nothing. I mean, there's definitely other things kind of like it in film. I'm not going to say there's not, but it's a hell of a fight scene. It's so freaking well done. The thing that's really interesting, and I did look a little bit up on this scene of how they did it, because it's a closed room with clearly a 10-foot ceiling, 4 walls, all of which you see. So they're moving the camera. The camera is in the room with the martial artists, and somehow they're lighting it. And I guess they mounted a light over the camera or something. And they were saying they basically had to keep the whole tightly together around the camera and just follow the camera guy as he was doing everything because of the way it was, because the guys were moving anyway. It's really crazy. It's a lot of times you're in the scene and you don't really think about it a whole lot, but for something set me off when he shut the door. That's what it was. I was like, wait a minute, you can see all 4 walls in this based on how they're shooting it. This is not a set.
Hmm.
Or it is, but it's an enclosed one with a ceiling that you're seeing, and because of the fast movements. Anyway, it's really really cool to see that. In the walls are all gray and all that too, so the light bounces around in really interesting
Well,
ways.
that's interesting. I mean, yeah. So basically, yeah, it's good to think about that. It's not just the three guys on screen who are doing the choreography. There's at least one or two guys, behind the camera that have to be on the move too, be nimble and stay out of their way, and
Yeah.
get around and see it. I think what you're saying, like the that's Final Showdown is fantastic. I waver. I can't really decide between the Raid and the Raid 2 which movie I like better. They're just kind of different films in a way, but like both of them have fantastic final fights. Um, but yeah, that one's great, and I think part of the reason it's great is one of the general things that Gareth does very well is he knows how to build and release, and he as much of this movie is punctuated with like a lot of just frantic nonstop action. There's a lot of like slow points, and he knows how to kind of just let the air out, and then set something up to where you see the tension building up. Like basically, like, from the moment Rama walks in that door, and he's drawn to it very, the way he kind of Rama catches what's going on in that room is he sees there's a tiny little window. He sees Andy strung up and being kind of like just body a little beaten by Mad Dog. Just one after the other. He's just getting worked over, and the score is really good. I want to talk about the music whenever we have a separate minute about that because there's a lot to say on the music in the movie. But it's a tight, kind of like shot where it's just sort of like drawing in to look through that window, and that's kind of setting the scene of like, oh, Ramos, he's kind of just in shock and seeing his brother being that badly. He goes into the room, and then there's a very long, not rushed at all. There's no words spoken between Rama and Mad Dog and Andy at all. And they just kind of, Mad Dog goes, okay, Rama's here. All right, this should be fun. Goes over to the chain that's holding Andy, up in the air by his arms, unhooks that. Andy goes down very, very slow and deliberate of Rama and Andy kind of getting the chains and bindings off of Andy and, kind of bandaging up his hand wound and all that. And all the time Mad Dog's just kind of like winding up that chain, really slow, just kind of just, taking their time because the whole audience is going, okay, this is about to get real, but it's not. They didn't just jump right into it, they just wordlessly kind of like let Mad Dog get in between the two of them, and then boom, all of a sudden the fight kicks off for like the next 8 or 9 minutes. It feels like.
Yeah, it's a really interesting character moment for Mad Dog of this movie where you don't need to have character moments usually in these kinds of things. And you really realize like how much he lives, like everybody else kind of fronts, like Machete Guy kind of fronts, like he enjoys being like a jerk, right? I mean,
Pushing the
I'm
easy
trying to watch my language here, but he enjoys being a jerk. We'll say jerk.
Yeah.
And, but Mad Dog like clearly lives for the fight. Like he just can't. He's willing to lose and let these guys go out. He wants this. Whoever was the guy who went down that hallway and knocked out 15 dudes, he's had so much excitement to fight this guy. And once he figured out Andy was tied to him, Andy's bait, right? He's hanging up like a worm on a hook. And now, he's getting his shot. And I, in a weird way, you're kind of like, I think he's okay with dying this way at the end of the scene. Like if he's gonna go out, he wanted it to be like this. He wanted it to be a challenge. So
yeah, it's gonna be someday, and this is probably he's the top talent he's seen. So yeah, might as well give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think they did, and they established that character be well with the Sergeant Jocko when they kind of square off. That's sort of like the first instance, and also where he kind of gets his little speech about like using guns. That's such a cheap thing. It's like this is right here in your fist. That's really where the pulse of the action is.
Yeah.
And just get right into it. And then that's also where he first gets to demonstrate his, I don't know, his power absorb mode or whatever he does when he's about to do the kill, and he's kind of like he's got Jock on the ropes and does this little neck snap. It's like he's kind of like, I feel like he's soaking in the moment or something. They kind of give him that little beat where he's kind of looking up to the heavens. He's like, okay, this is it. Feeling the rush of this whole thing, and they which they kind of repeat a little bit in the last fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the Jocko fight is always. I mean, whenever I showed it with friends or at parties like that, the character of Jocko is just such a steadfast, upright kind of guy that that fight in particular. Spoiler: Jocko dies. He doesn't emerge victorious against Mad Dog, but that's whenever he finally goes down, that's always gets a big like, oh, like everyone kind of like really like Jocko almost as much as they like Rama. They're just like, man, that guy was I didn't want that guy to die. They wanted to see him to make it out, but.
Yeah,
I think
it's a movie that's willing to do those things. It's a movie that's willing to have like characters you feel sympathy for. I mean, you already feel bad for every one of those cops. Like 2 seconds into the movie, like, oh, this isn't going to go well. But, it's like the sniper. Oh my god, the sniper scene. Like let him scream, and you're like Jesus, and then it's like, oh, because it's bait. It's like, oh my god, just awful.
So you can get over to the window, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyway, I do you have anything else in your notes? I want to make sure we hit all the beats, cover all the things.
Yeah, well, I mean that's definitely an overdue notice on. I have not heard the original soundtrack of the original release of the film when it was brought over to the U.S. and they had to change the movie's title from The Raid to The Raid Redemption because I guess there was an already existing The Raid somewhere on the U.S. side. They had to acknowledge. At the same time, they were looking for someone to do a revamped soundtrack, and they found I can't remember through what means. They found Mike Shinoda, the basically electronics guy for Linkin Park, and said, hey, do you want to score this movie?
Oh, interesting.
And that's and I think what he put together, I think it suits and enhances the movie just perfectly because and Gareth had said he as a director studied up a lot on John Carpenter in the making of this film, and I think you can kind of see that in a lot of like
Assault on Precinct 13. Yeah.
That and then in the resulting score by or soundtrack by Mike Shinoda is very it's very synth heavy. It's got a lot of like pulsating, kind of like synth beats. Like you kind of remember when they're trapped in the hallway and like there's that exposure cut where the SWAT guys are down here in the dark, not knowing what's going on. They kind of like this camera moves up to the upper floor where those guys are just waiting with the AKs to any kind of sign of where the cops are. It's kind of just this pulsating heavy beat that Mike put down and just kind of builds that kind of horror, that tension. And I think the fact that basically I guess the film was already cut and done, Mike could go through and really sort of build that the same way that Gareth builds and releases the action. He kind of is able to do that with the music. And I think it just it's like one of the few movie soundtracks that I'll kind of have in my Apple library and just be driving around, and all of a sudden the machete fight song comes on, I'm instantly energized behind the wheel. Yeah,
that's awesome. It was fascinating to hear that it's not the first score to the film. Like that's really interesting because it feels absolutely organic to the movie and feels such a piece of it. But you're right. Yeah, I do feel like it does a lot of good stuff to kind of enhance and kind of because of that pulsating beat kind of fits in with your own heartbeat and kind of the aggression of everything that's going on. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Although Mike does, it wasn't just Mike Shinoda. It was also a guy, Joe Trapani, who I think came back to do the music on the second film. But they also have very good moments, like the very end as they're walking away. I think they're as well as doing good action music beats. They actually do a very good kind of like lighter, sort of resolved kind of peaceful music too, and that they were able to do that in the second Raid movie as well.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to watching the second one. Partially,
I can't wait to watch it.
The first time I watched it, it's just a roller coaster, right? You're just like white knuckling your whole way through it, and this time I was like, I was paying more attention to the plot and kind of who was doing what and who the characters were and all that. And it does feel like, okay, there's this whole world outside the building for Rama to go interact with. But it, like, you really want to know what story is he telling people when he walks back out. My understanding is
I've had a day. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's like my understanding is that the sequel picks up like within a day or something of the
it's
action of
pretty
this.
much immediately. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or they like there's yeah, it's kind of some cuts here and there in time at the beginning of the second film, but like yeah, as far as Rom is concerned, his first entrance is basically like immediately after they leave that. Like there's a guy at Bunawar that Andy tells him to go find. It's just like, this is the guy that's on the inside who's actually a good guy. Talk to him about trying to continue the fight against the corruption in the police department and all the rest, and it just kind of goes from there.
Okay.
Um, yeah, no, it's to me the second film is the just as good, or there's and it expands the world. You're able to get out there and I think someone says it's more like kind of the internal affairs type of movie where she gives a little bit of like going undercover and all this kind of stuff, but not to spoil too much. But I mean, there's lots of great characters in it, and then the choreography remains at the that upper tight level. Um, as far as regular other notes I might have for the first raid, trivia wise, I noticed that in the scene where they are trapped, kind of the initial ambush, and then they get into that room and they're just sort of like trying to find their way out, and they kind of go down through the floor. There's a moment where someone says, "Hey, they're coming from the upper floor," and and like basically a bad guy's going to drop down through the hole that they made, and which one of the SWAT guys neatly, kind of neatly lines it up, and as the guy falls in, grabs him and throws him out the window, right? And Gareth Evans did slip in a Wilhelm scream in there. They're caught, and that's one thing that I think it just recently I had talked to my kids. I have two boys who are in preteen age now, and I was showing them the history of Wilhelm screams, like when it was first used and how it's basically been in Star Wars and pretty much every other movie ever made. That has someone that's screaming. But yeah,
Oh
I
man,
thought that was
I
pretty funny.
never hear them when they happen. I always have
No,
to be told later. So, oh man.
I probably missed it the first time. It's just by now I've seen the movie so many times. It's like okay,
Yeah.
yep, here it comes. But yeah, other stuff in there. Um, yeah, most of the movie. I'm gonna trivia at the back. Um, there is we can probably talk about this too, and if we do another podcast for the raid too later. But there's Iko Uwais again, Rama, and the guy and the sergeant Jaka, who's played by Joe Toslim. Oh, Joe Toslim, he was in the Mortal Kombat movie, the Scorpion one,
Oh,
uh, which yeah, he was the bad guy in that, I think.
okay.
Which who is Sub Zero? He was the bad guy, and well, I didn't see it, but yeah, he was in that movie.
I'll be totally honest. I saw one Mortal Kombat movie in the summer of 1993, and that is
That's probably the same one I saw. Yeah, that
that's
was
yeah
enough.
that's my exposure to the Mortal Kombat
Yeah,
universe.
yeah, yep. Well, he both Joe and Iko both starred in another movie that came out after both Raid movies called The Night Comes for Us, which is like I think on Netflix. But that is the case where that film, I don't know who the director was, but it was definitely seemed like it was more shot for 13 to 14-year-old adolescent boys, kind of like in terms of just like let's go for maximum action, maximum gore. Like to me, like the Raid, I always kind of caution people, especially caution my coworkers when I first premiered the movie. I have to go, look, this is a violent film that doesn't pull any punches, but violence can be art in the context of a movie if it's made with the right purpose and has the right grounding to it, like I think this film does. Um, Night Comes for Us takes those characters, take those actors, and put them into a thing where there's a line for me personally, I guess for everyone, it's like what's violent and what's like way too much, like what's absurd or excessive. And I think that movie, like their final fight with those two guys square off is just, I don't know, it gets almost into horror levels of just like how much gore and pain are they gonna go through. It's just it just calls to mind to me. Like I always I meant to bring that movie up because whenever the Raid and the Raid 2 get discussed in like YouTube comments, things like that, people are always like, oh yeah, you got to go watch Night Comes for Us as well. I'm like, well, yeah, I get it. I get there's sort of a little connection between the two, but like totally different director, and like and just the level that's in there is just too much for me. So like this, I think the Raid and the Raid 2 probably represent like my upper limit of what I think is violence in a movie without really getting ugly, so to speak.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Um, hmm. Think of the music. I think one of the last things I think about the raid is that well, two things. One is that the fact that these two movies are some of my favorite action movies. I've got a whole list of movies that I want my kids to see, but I'm holding back. Like, what age do you show a movie like this to your kids? And like, I don't know quite what that is, but hopefully before they go off to college. But just kind of like um, the right age where I don't get a look of disapproval from my wife, I guess is the right answer. Forget what that is. They are making a U.S. remake of The Raid. I've been told. It's
They already did it though. It's called Judge Dredd.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dredd got a lot of and it is. You're right. It's that movie's very very similar, right?
Oh, Dredd
Jake
is a,
Caliber, a
a
good guy.
straight up rip off of this movie. It's fun. And that's the one I actually think has bad digital blood and whatnot.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
to me, I could see artifacts and stuff, and it may have just been the streaming I was using, but I think it's a fun movie. But it's clearly like, oh, the raid. Let's do that with a helmet. Like,
a special gun that does everything.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, well, that said, I would still prefer that one to what I think this one's going to be. The remake that they're coming out. I think they're setting it in Pittsburgh. Michael Bay is not directing, but he is producing it.
oh,
So I
gee.
don't know if that tells you anything about what's going to happen with it.
And they're not
Um,
hiring Gareth Evans, I'm sure.
he is involved, I guess, in production, but not directing it. Um, I just don't know what they could bring to it. I mean, and given Michael Bay's directing style, like you know, I, Michael Bay is the kind of guy who, in a Transformers movie, takes like a shot of Megan Fox and Shia LaBeouf talking outside, and he just does this 360 spin around them for like Disney number of rotations. I just don't get it. And I feel like if he had if
You're
he
much
had
nicer about it than I.
please, all the vitriol you have for Michael Bay, please let me know because I'm sure I agree with you 100%.
Oh,
Um,
I just he's a good video music maker.
uh,
Yeah, music video maker. He if you need to shoot an Aerosmith video, I would hire Michael
he's
Bay.
the guy. Yeah,
He's the guy. After that, not so sure.
yeah. I think his approach to action, I think, is pretty much anti Gareth Evans, and so that's why it's more surprising to me that they're involved in any way, shape, or form. Um, but yeah, so I guess we'll see. I'm sure when it comes out, I think it might be coming out this year. Um, but I'll probably hear from a few coworkers who know me as like the raid guy, movie night guy, and go, "Oh, what'd you think?" I don't know. I can't imagine I'll see that, but I was just sort of. I mean, if anything, I'll be happy if that movie comes out, gets all the marketing press that the original raid should have gotten, and then people try and look back and find the original one. But
Yeah, I can see a world in which like they release it and HBO Max is like, oh, let's drop the other one as well. Like, what can it hurt? People more subscribers. Let's do that.
yeah, absolutely.
It looks like the
Yep.
director on it is a gentleman named Patrick Hughes, who's from Australia. Oh, he did all the Hitman movies. So,
Okay. I haven't
and
seen any of those.
Expendables 3. So your mileage may vary. Um,
It probably would be called serviceable director.
let me actually back up. He didn't do the Hitman movies. He did the Hitman's Bodyguard movies,
Oh, okay. Hmm.
which I have not seen and I'm only vaguely aware of. So,
Ditto.
um, yeah, I can't say I'm excited about a remake. When it comes out, we'll redrop this podcast and dupe some people into watching it or
Right.
listening to it so we can get them to watch the original.
What successful remakes have there been? I mean, like I know things like Old Boy. No, I'm trying to think of other recent examples that try but don't succeed.
I always think it's super dicey trying to bring anything that kind of has its DNA in the East, and try and make it. I mean, that's how you end up with 1998 Godzilla, right? I mean,
my God.
we we just can't stop tinkering. So yeah.
Like, we'll do this, but bigger in a very, in a very westernized way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a ton else to say on the film, other than, y'all, if you haven't seen it, and you can hear the obvious enthusiasm we both have for it. I would caution it is a hard R, as you know, it's as Mike was saying, it's not horror movie level gory, but there's people get boo-boos, and there's some injuries.
Yeah, they get the last boo-boos they'll ever get. Yep.
But I think it's well worth it. And I definitely place it up there with some of my favorite martial arts and action films. It has both, the gunplay, and it has the martial arts. So, check it out. And that's all I really have to say.
Yeah. Oh, last bit of trivia. None other than Samuel L. Jackson was like on a talk show and listed The Raid and The Raid 2 as some of his favorite movies of all time. So if you need another, credible recommendation, I think he's a pretty good source.
That's pretty wild, actually.
Yeah. Like, out of nowhere, I was like, oh wow, cool. That's that's probably the most prep those movies got in the U.S. was that talk show appearance. Sadly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Mike. And we'll come back and we'll do either Raid 2 or we'll do whatever you feel like. But it's been
thanks again. It's a lot of fun. You. Yeah, enjoyed it.
All right, we'll see everybody soon. That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.